many of us. It's been so difficult. It's been never-ending battle. We haven't been able to have closure, so it's been even harder than it would normally be. My mother, well, to the world, she was one person, but to me, she was my world. She was everything to me. She was really small. She's barely 5 foot tall, but she has a big heart, big personality, big smile, which makes up for whatever she lacks in size. She definitely made up for in spirit. She was a very dedicated mother, a dedicated wife who basically devoted her entire life to caring for all of us. I'm 27 years old, and in my 27 years, I've never seen my mom once go out for a movie with her friends, or go shopping with friends, or do anything that was social, because she basically worked long hours, came home every day to take care of her 2 children. If I am where I am today, I owe so much of it to her. I've been speaking to the media a lot lately. I can't count the number of interviews I've been giving the last 2 or 3 weeks. And every time I spoke about my mother to them, always the same thing. I always kept a straight face because I spoke about the technical aspects of the circumstance. I spoke about everything except my feelings. But today I'm here to speak about her, to speak about our relationship with her, to speak about her as a human being. Growing up, I was not very close to both of my parents. I spent a lot of time elsewhere. I spent most of my younger life growing up in my grandmother's house. I went away to boarding school when I was 12. And most of my tertiary education I spent either away from home or abroad. In 2010, I left to the UK to do my master's. It was the first time I left to go abroad to study. And that was the turning point in our lives. That was really when I became very close to my mother. I suppose the distance we would only Skype, so when we Skyped, we spent long hours talking. And I suppose it was different from every other time we spoke, because when we were on Skype, all we could do is speak. And that was when I went to the UK, that was when I realized how much both of my parents loved me. I suppose I spent most of my teenagers just taking them for granted. I loved them, but I didn't appreciate how much they loved me. But once I went abroad, everything changed. Ever since then, all I've ever wanted to do was finish studying and come home and live at home and spend time with my parents. But alas, I don't know if I'll ever get that, because now that I've finally finished studying and come back, I don't have my mother. I came back and worked in Malaysia for a year after I finished my master's, and that was the time I had actually lived at home for the first time for such a long time. After such a long time, I spent many hours in traffic jams with my mother. We carpooled to work often and back. I spent all my weekends with her. I ran errands with her, and I remember when I left to study once again after that year, I remember that every day that I was away for the 2 years after that I spoke to her every single day. My room was filled with pictures of my family. Speaking to her every day was the highlight of my day. The day the plane went missing was no different. She was rushing to leave for the airport, but I forced her to stay on the phone with me, so she spent an hour speaking to me on the phone. She told me how proud she was of me and how much she loved me. And the last words we exchanged were how much we loved each other. I will never forget that conversation I had. And I will never forget how painful it was to receive a call from my dad at 1 a.m. in the morning when I was in the UK. And he called me and he said to me, "Grace, when's your next exam?" It was a Saturday, it was 1 a.m. and I told him I have an exam on Monday. He said, "Get on the next flight and come home." From the tone of his voice, I thought something must have happened to my mother or my sister, because he sounded so shaken. I've never heard him sound like that before. I just remember shivering and dropping my phone on the floor and not being able, I didn't know what to do. He eventually called me back and told me that something had happened to the plane my mother was on, and all I could do was stand there. I couldn't think, I couldn't move, so I just grabbed my passport and my handbag and walked out the door. I lived about 3.5 hours away from the nearest airport and I had to make my way there and get on the next flight home. I was basically alone. I had no idea what was going on. I was on Google for the entire journey until I had to get on the plane, refreshing the news feed. And there were so many rumors, so many pictures of dead bodies floating in water. And it was excruciating. I remember the 14-hour flight being so painful because there was an information void. For the 14 or 15 hours that I was on that plane, I could not go on Google, I could not go on WhatsApp, I had no idea what was happening. And sadly, 1 year later, we still have no idea what is happening. I still miss my mother every day. I cry every day. What was a dull pain in my chest has now become permanent. I don't even realize that it's there or not anymore. Every day is like a living nightmare. I get out of bed, get through the day, and get back to bed again. I miss my mother so much. She was to me everything. She was my go-to person. She was my best friend. She was my confidant. I spoke to her about everything. It was her dream to see me graduate, call to the bar. It was her dream to see my sister graduate as a doctor. But sadly, she didn't get to see me get called to the bar. And we don't know if she get to see my sister become a doctor. But now if you were here today, I would tell you how much I love you. And how much I wish you could be here. How I would give everything in my life to have you back. My hopes, my dreams, everything I have, everything that I will ever have, does not mean anything without you here. And so all of you who have come here today, we're so grateful that you have come. We want you to know that it is so important that we get some form of closure. It's so important that they do not give up on the people that we love. And not only for us, but so much of it is also important for all of you who are here today. In the interest of aviation safety, it is important that they don't give up so easily. Because if this were ever to happen again, we want to know that the people responsible will be committed, that the people responsible will search, that the people responsible will not give up. So thank you for your support. It means everything to us. I've loved my mother so much and I know she gave everything for me, and she would give everything for me in a heartbeat. This is why I am here speaking to you today. This is why we are going through this heart-wrenching episode talking about my feelings. It's not easy, but I'm doing it because I need to know that I've done everything that I can for my mother, even if she's not here. Thank you.
That was a very sudden thing to do to her. We're supposed to start over to France in a short while. Hope you still be here.